Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to those who are joining us from Africa and Europe. A warm welcome from sunny Singapore. I would like to welcome you to our webinar today on Deep Tech for Good, No Citizens Left Behind, organized by the SGInnovate team and the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development, with the strong support from PJ, Grace and Mikala from the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation of Sierra Leone. My name is Tuan from SGInnovate. We are a Singapore government-owned organization that invests in and helps build deep tech startups, talent and community. We focus on frontier technologies such as AI, autonomous technologies, quantum computing, food and agri-tech. We believe that such deep technologies can help improve the state of the world. Therefore, a couple of months ago, together with our global partners, including the UNDP Global Center, we announced the Deep Tech for Good initiative to accelerate and scale innovative solutions around the world that can help to achieve economic and social good. Since then, we have been featuring global leaders such as Professor Yoshua Bengio, one of the three godfathers of AI in the world, and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, chairman of the Sinovation Ventures, as they talked about how AI can help make our future economy and society more resilient and sustainable. We also had Ms. Paula Goldman, the first ever Chief Ethical and Humane Use Officer at Salesforce, to share her views on how technology should be used in a responsible and trustworthy manner. Today, we are privileged to have another amazing leader with us, Dr. David Sengeh, Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education and the Chief Innovation Officer of Sierra Leone. With a very young population coming of age and with Dr. David Sengeh's vision to leverage science and technology to advance its development, Sierra Leone promises to be an exciting story where innovation can be done right to benefit its people, especially in the sectors of food, education, and health. Just days ago, AI company MacroEyes actually announced that they are introducing AI to Sierra Leone's COVID-19 response, making it faster and easier to understand health system capacity. There are many titles and accolades that I can mention about David. What I want to highlight is that besides being trained at Harvard and MIT and being Sierra Leone's very first Chief Innovation Officer, David is also an Afrobeat rapper, a clothing designer, and a regular football player. So I believe that you will all agree we will be having a very exciting talk ahead by David. Before we invite David to share his thoughts on how development should be based on local needs and supported by technology, I would like to invite our friend and partner, Janine, at the UNDP Global Center to say a few words and take the program forward. Janine, please.
Sure, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Tuan, for that great intro. We're all very excited to have Dr. Sengeh joining us today to give his insights on how tech and deep tech specifically can support local development. Just a quick intro, my name is Janine Chivitate. I'm here with UNDP's Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development, based out of Singapore. I'm the acting deputy director here, and we've been working very closely with SGInnovate to collaborate on this Deep Tech for Good series, as well as a lot of other initiatives. So we're very much looking forward to speaking with David today. And we'll also be talking with him a little bit later during the Fireside Chat on a really exciting initiative on AI for policymakers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Janine. And we would now like to invite Dr. David Sengeh to deliver his opening speech. David, please.
Hi, I thank you very much for inviting me. It's less an opening speech and just more open conversation, really. I think for us in Sierra Leone, we are on a path where we know that technology and innovation is our only option for national development. We are lucky that we have a president who has a vision that has done a couple things. One, focused on education. Our flagship project in Sierra Leone is human capital development. education, healthcare, and food security. At the core of the Human Capital Development Project is what we call the Free Quality School Education Policy. And the free quality school education really is akin to many of the things that have happened in Singapore. And in many ways, we use Singapore as a model for education and technology and really going towards the universality of access. And we had made sure that access was available to everyone, from preschool all the way to senior secondary school. And that then means that we have to be able to ensure that kids have not just the right learning materials, but the right teachers and the right infrastructure. When we did this policy, we increased enrollment by about between 30% to 50%, depending on the school level. So the system was overwhelmed. And we still have infrastructural challenges like classroom sizes and benches and teaching and learning materials, but there's a lot more that's going that's positive. We've increased retention rates, we've increased completion rates, and this is also true for girls. And we are including many more people who didn't have access to education before to now have access to education. The second thing that the president did was he established what we call the Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation, amongst many other things, but these are the ones that I am involved with as minister and CIO. And the Directorate of Science and Technology, the Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation is based out of the Office of the President. And our vision is simple. It really is two things. One is to support the government to deliver on the National Development Plan, our priorities through science, technology, and innovation, and to make Sierra Leone into an innovation nation, a nation where entrepreneurs into a hub where entrepreneurs can think, create, build, and really establish problem solving entities. And we do this, we're driven by a whole bunch of different things. We're driven by we're driven by elements around where we know we have a national innovation and digital strategy, which has a vision called digitization for all. And that is at the heart of that is digitization for the individual, digitization for the economy and governance. And there are multiple sub-components in there, really, that focus on things like hybrid technology, systems where things have to work online and offline, and also things around laws and regulation and the policies that we need to automate and solutions that we build within government. Another component, and I'll give examples later on in the Q&A about how we're applying these things, because it's not just theory for us. We needed to apply, and we've done a lot more of that this year, actually. And one of the things that we also have there as a principle, our guiding principle, is what we call Country as AI Lab. And so Country as a lab, how do we use AI to really solve government problems? And as now we're doing this with MacroEyes and a whole set of other entities and organizations. So for us, it's that the National Innovation and Digital Strategy is not just a 10-year strategy that's abstract. It is things that we decided after many consultations with countries in Africa, Estonia, other partners, that these are things that we can do and implement, and we've been able to do that strategically. And the last thing I'll talk about before we open up the conversation really is that at the intersection for us of education and technology and innovation is where we see the biggest transformations. And so, for example, we've been able to launch with DSTI and MBSSE, the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, platforms like the Education Data Hub. And the Education Data Hub is a framework and a platform where we're able to see all schools, understand their connectivity, understand their resources that they have, and then link that to performance. And this is important because as we then think about improving quality in schools, we need to be able to, in real time or near real time, really understand what the data is saying and what are the policy. Currently, I'm in the northern part of Sierra Leone, actually. I'm in Kabbalah, close to the Guinean border. And if I'm coming here, I need to be able to, I'm using two things. I'm looking at the Education Data Hub to understand the data, and I'm also using the GIS platform that we have that links many government services with not just education. So when I'm engaging with the community and the citizens, I can see that they don't have a library, or I can see where the library is removed from some place, or the library doesn't have ICT. So I understand the challenges. I can see how many schools in the chiefdom where I am in Kwenadugo, Falaba, in the districts that do not have ICT facilities. I can look at the connectivity map and see what the connectivity is across schools here. And so the engagement that I have now with the citizens is based on and informed by data. The policies that we develop is based on and informed by the data and the analytics across multiple platforms, across service delivery education, across learning outcomes, and across infrastructure and connectivity maps. And we also layer this on top of population and population data. So it really is that when we think about government service delivery, the National Development Plan or the Education Sector Plan, we're not being abstract. We have guiding policies and guiding frameworks that's rooted in data and digitization, and these roots from the president, and that's why the STI is based in the office of the president. But the ultimate impact of that has to be felt by the community. And so as a policymaker, as problem solver, we're looking at those data using the platforms that we build to engage the stakeholders in the community and understand how we can improve, or areas that we can change, or things that are working well. And this is what is the vision and the framework that we're trying to use in Sierra Leone. And perhaps I'll end here, and then we can open it up for discussions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, David. I really liked how you talked about, that this isn't just theory for you. And I think so often we can kind of get really lost or at least caught up in that theory and kind of how the pieces work together, but you're actually doing it and you're making it happen, and you're testing and you're looking at the data and learning from it and figuring out how you can quickly iterate around that. And I think that's something that I would love to speak with you a little bit more about. So let me just jump into my first question here. But before that, also just making sure that the audience knows that we would love to hear from you. Any burning questions that you have for Dr. Sengeh, please do add them to the Q&A function, and we'll be looking through them, and we will ask a few of them toward the end of this session. So David, you had mentioned that access is one of the major areas that you're focusing on. Can you explain or just tell us a little bit more specifically how tech and deep tech can be transformative in the education sector in Sierra Leone? And what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen there of really kind of trying to use those tech objectives and methodologies in trying to meet some of these big access challenges? Over to you.
Thank you. I think when we think about education service delivery, access, quality, all of that is for increased outcomes. So if we think about the outcomes that we want outcomes around content access, we want outcomes around retention, around completion, around pass rates, around skills that people are getting. And at the heart of that is technology, whether it's paper technology or AI, right? Or in terms of resource distribution and resource. The biggest challenge, so I'll maybe start with a challenge and see how we're trying to solve that through various partnerships, and then the opportunities. The biggest challenge is connectivity, right? So if you're in an urban area, then you have connectivity, then everybody has access to a mobile phone and a mobile phone network. But if you're up where I am, up north, you have to go to a town that you're sure has connectivity. And there are many schools along in between towns that do not have signal. And so if they don't have signal, then what you really have and can only have is paper technology. Over through the Teaching Service Commission, we're able to provide some physical materials, materials to enhance and augment, and that complemented with radio. So if you think about the next layer, you say radio technology, and we had continuous radio education during COVID school closures that was complementary to the paper-based. And the layer on top of that was then people who had access to mobile. And so with mobile network, with Orange, we had, we'd opened up zero-rated connectivity to Coursera and several other solutions. And with the STI, we even advanced that further, and we had a Coursera workforce initiative with World Economic Forum and Coursera, where we, I think, have now close to 10,000 people who are taking courses online that these courses are available to everybody. So we're doing all of those in Sierra Leone, and the scale and the reach depends on where you are. So it really is a disconnect between making these services available for all, and really that the people who are accessing it are those in urban areas and not those in really rural, remote areas. And one of the things actually on my trip that I'm going back with is that these villages, we need specific policies and intervention strategies for these villages where connectivity might not always be there. And if you think about deep tech, for us within the ministry, we have a delivery team. The delivery team is looking to roll out a project called One Tablet Per School. And the idea within the One Tablet Per School framework really is that we can track teacher attendance, we can be able to analyze the gaps that people are going to fill. If we have this data, then we are able to maybe build algorithms, right? So one of the projects that we did last year was to look at when you just take the annual school census, are we able to predict performance based on about 200 or so variables that we collect per school? And we have 11,000 schools, so 200 by 11,000, we build some algorithms that can tell us that can place whether binary classification about performance. And we also had this in different classifications. So we had goods, average, quality, and not. And we published this result. We did it in collaboration with some of our partners in University of Pretoria in South Africa. But these are all things we can do when we have the data, and we have the data. And now we're beginning to apply it to see how we can best predict which schools are likely going to fail, or what are the variables that are linked to performance, and then how do we play with that. We also are running an education innovation challenge with the STI, and now we have those data, and that one is at student level, so ability to read, ability to do math. And we will build models based on those data now, as we get more data as well, to see what are the indications, because we have all the schools data, and now we have the students reading and learning and doing math data, and we can now begin to not just have a school aggregate data, but the student performance data. Those are all possible, but it has to be through with connectivity. And one of the things we're doing with connectivity is with UNICEF and ISDB and a couple other people. We have what we call the Giga Connect. Giga is an initiative that is looking at bringing connectivity to schools, and we want to connect all 11,000 schools in Sierra Leone through, again, different methods.
Wow, that's very ambitious. We definitely look forward to being involved in that as you move forward. And one of the things that you brought up about access in relation to COVID-19 is a trend that, of course, we've seen globally, right? Of school-age students not having access to distance learning through all the new social distancing policies that have been happening this year, and that's where the issue of access, of bandwidth, availability of technical know-how and training really comes into place. So in terms of COVID-19, what impact have you seen that had in your quest to leapfrog the development journey through using tech and innovation? I'm sure you heard Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, noted at the beginning of this pandemic that he's seen that it's accelerated digital transformation around the world that would have happened in 2 years in just a couple of months. I'm wondering if that's what you've seen as well, especially now that we've gone through many months of this pandemic, and what are some of the opportunities that you've seen arise from this, and how are you seeing that using tech and data is helping Sierra Leone respond to the crisis?
Thank you. There are lots there, and I'll start with a story actually. And one is one of my colleagues, friends online recently was saying that she has used more online. She's used online for services more in the last couple of months than she did the preceding 5 years in Sierra Leone. And that by itself just answers the question. It's that we have gone online with many of the services that perhaps we wouldn't have been able to go online with over the last couple of months. And most of that, the SDI has a direct link to that. So now travel.gov.sl is a website where people can link with their travel and get their COVID tests before they travel or arrive, and have integrated payment systems that was built in partnership with other private sector organizations. So the thing that we've been able to do is really enhance and link with private sector, small startups in Sierra Leone. And these technologies are being built by Sierra Leoneans, young Sierra Leonean startups who otherwise will not have been given the opportunity to compete. Within government, we have what we call the public expenditure request. We make requests to government, to central government, for our budget and our allocations. It used to be paper-based. It used to be a long paper base that gets lost everywhere. Now it's online. My ministry, I don't complete any initial requests anymore now, even though both of they're still paper. I only use the online platform, and I can be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and approve or see and review, which we didn't have before. So now government itself is being more efficient. One of the things that I'm really proud of for the team is really, again, following through with the practical part of the National Innovation and Digital Strategy, which is hybrid technology solutions. Singapore and Korea and many of those countries were hailed for building apps and for contact tracing, apps for proximity analysis in COVID. Those apps wouldn't have worked for us, right? We have only about 20% of our people are using data. And so if we want COVID solutions to be available for everybody, then it has to be working for the 87% of our people who use SMS and USSD. And so we build and optimize SMS, USSD based solutions. And within a couple months, we had 2 million plus people who were instances where people were doing self-check analysis, using SMS and USSD, or getting updates information. And that is something that we've been able to use to deliver lots of services. And this is a technology that we built maybe 8-9 months ago, but it really became critical during COVID, because then we're able to apply it to other areas. So that has been something that we've been able to do when we're working with WHO. WHO is working with my team to see how they can even use that in other parts of the world. And so it's important that technologies that are being developed here now are up for consideration for exporting and for engaging with other parts. Other examples that obviously in the education sector, I talked about distance learning and distance education that we were able to do. And now also, we get to build technologies that allow students to access their information and their materials in ways that they couldn't before, which limits, it just brings efficiency into the system. So there are many examples. We're building an app, again, through starting young people, for markets, for example, for marketplaces, because again, when we wanted to think about the congestion, we built analytical tools to understand how we have a large toll road that goes out of Freetown to the rest of the country. And we build analytics of those data to map and understand how people obey the curfew or the lockdown methods that we had. So there are several applications, both in analytics, visualization, that are and where being used by government and to inform government policy.
Wow, that's super exciting, everything that you've been able to do, and seeing how you've really taken a blended approach as well, I think is great, because not one solution works for every context, as you well know. But it's really wonderful to hear, the work that the tech response team for COVID-19 has been able to do, building off of the work that you've already been doing, as well as starting some new initiatives as well that you mentioned on digital payments, using geospatial data, and apps for travel and quarantine and marketplaces. I have a couple of follow-up questions on that. So one, I think it was wonderful that you've been working with local startups, local innovators. I would love to know how you identified them. So how were you able to find these young people, and maybe not so young people, with these really creative ideas, and bring them into the fold to actually work with government, work with the big private sector players to actually make this happen? And also a question on, as I mentioned, it's wonderful that you've used this combo of apps for those who have access and then SMS and other tools for those that might not reach the other 87% that you had mentioned. What were some challenges that you may have faced regarding uptake and outreach for all of that, to make sure that you're actually reaching the largest number of people? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think with reaching people is just communication, right? If people don't know that services exist, they won't use them. And it's also just know-how. And I think the way we address that is by using things that people know how to use. Everybody knows how to SMS or use USSD, because everybody uses USSD to top up or to transfer money. So it's not a strange modality. And ultimately, then it's just about them being aware that Star 468 exists, right? And the responsibility is on us to make that be available. But the modality is the modality that people already use. So the biggest constraint is communication about the function, which we work with our partners to do. In terms of how we find people, I do have the best people at the SGI. They are fantastic people, and they also know who the best other people are. So I think it's a case where my team in some ways knows who's doing what, but also because the companies, right? So the local drone companies know that if you want to work with drones, you come to us, because we have the drone corridor and we have the networks to do drone work. And we are now actually, with the Gates Foundation, we just got some resource to develop a proposal to really have a full-fledged medical drone delivery program within our drone corridor. It's a tech for good drone corridor we did with UNICEF at the university. And we will roll that out. So if you're a young drone enthusiast, you come to us, because otherwise there's no other place you go. If you're also a lot of the companies, for example, the Fixed Solution or Digital, who are doing things with technology. So one of our objectives, one of our roles is ecosystem strengthening. One of our mission is ecosystem strengthening. So for us, it's in our interest to go find the people who are in the ecosystem. And one of our activities, I think that's we're working on now through next month, is to do a full ecosystem mapping, so we know who's who and who's doing what. And that will make it even easier for us to reach out to those private sector companies. It's not a competition. In the beginning, it seemed like, and I was looking at some of the Q&A, but in one of our challenges that I faced is people outside the private sector thought we were competing or we're removing things from them. But it's not a competition, right? It's that there's a nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem, or it didn't exist. So we have to create it, and we need foundational things to create it, and we have to create it with people, with entities. And for us, once people understood that this was not about their livelihood or their well-being, then people are willing to collaborate with us. We do have people internally who can build and develop, and that's okay, and that's good, because actually there's nothing wrong with government being able to deliver solutions, right? There are many things the private sector cannot and shouldn't do, and government should be able to have the capacity to do that. And I think that there's usually a misunderstanding about the role of government and government's ability to create within. And innovation has to not be foreign to government. It has to come from within government, including coming from, in addition to coming from private sector. And so it's about the ecosystem, really. So we have open arms. We are willing and interested to work with other people. Other people come to us to choose us just based on the nascent ecosystem.
Great, thanks, David. I think this is something that we've seen a bit from certain governments around the world, that they've really had to kind of open up and be creative and kind of work with different actors than they normally would in their response and recovery efforts for COVID-19. Is this something that you see that's going to stick? Looking, both at the Sierra Leone government, which it sounds like is probably a pretty positive answer, but globally with other, entities that you've worked with and governments, do you think that this new kind of way of operating is something that's going to stick around once, hopefully we have COVID-19 under control?
If it doesn't stick, then it's those countries will get left behind. I think for us in Sierra Leone, our objective, this is where we're going to go anyway. We're just accelerating towards it now even further. And I know there are many things we wanted to do within our National Innovation and Digital Strategy. If we do most of that, then we can update it, then we should update it. And we should then have an updated version of that strategy to reflect the advances that we've done. But things around policy, things around connectivity outreach, things around how we get the data and the ecosystem take time. And we have just been forced to reimagine how we work. And that's something that we needed to do. So if it doesn't stick, I mean, at the ministry or at DISTI, this is our way of life. So we're happy. And it's a question of how do we continue doing that.
I think that's the right answer, and I hope that many other governments see it the same way. And I think this is kind of a good segue into the next question, which is about knowledge and innovation. And I think for so long it's kind of been seen as something that's coming out of Silicon Valleys and the London and other places, and that other countries are kind of taking note of that and seeing how they can apply it to their own development. But obviously, we've seen that the government of Sierra Leone and many others are really kind of leading the way in how they can be innovative and iterative and creative. And I would love to hear from you what lessons you think Sierra Leone can impart to Singapore and to all of the countries that are really aiming to achieve a more sustainable future through using technology and innovation.
I think one is equity. I mean, I don't know what there's inequity in every society. So it is that, particularly in the challenge in a place like Singapore might be where it's almost the opposite to us. For us, most people are not online, whereas in Singapore, I imagine almost everybody's online. But it's that because we are forced to solve for the people on the edge who are not connected, then our solutions work for everybody. Right? We'll still build the online solution, we'll still build the apps, but we have to build the USSD and SMS. And I think it's that countries like Singapore and Switzerland or whoever has the resources must, in the ability to build the apps and 3G, 4G enabled systems, have to remember that there are some people who may not have the resources and capacity to access those things, and we can't leave them behind. And so inclusion, building tech with an inclusion lens is really important. And I think we've seen that we're able to reach more, we're able to have bigger impact and better impact when we allow for and inclusive use of tech.
Definitely, I think that's something that, as the UN, you know, is one of our biggest goals as well, and we really try to make sure that we have that lens with everything we do, right? That all of our interventions, they need to reach that last mile. They, you know, we need to have the element of, you know, making sure that we leave no one behind is the terminology that we use. And I think, you know, it's something that when we're talking about these big ideas of tech and innovation and deep tech, we can get really excited about it, and I think sometimes forget that element, and also the human part of it, which is something that you brought up earlier. Of, you know, it's not just about the tech; it's about the people, and how do we really involve them. So definitely a lesson for all of us to remember. So I would love to talk with you a little bit now about the great partnership that we have, that we're working on together with your team and with Intel, to more quickly bring AI skills to policymakers and young people. So this is something that we are piloting in Sierra Leone, and, you know, we're looking forward to seeing how things go. But of course, as we spoke about, at the end of the day, it's really about human capital, right? So what do you think are the best and kind of quickest ways that we can really make strides on that, you know, building up the human capital around, you know, all these deep tech technologies like AI and others?
I think the way to do it is to do it. One thing that I've learned is, you know, it's we can strategize, we can think, we can solve for all the different scenarios, but the best way to roll out and have an impact is to choose a use case and do it at scale. I also believe that in doing things at scale, countries like, again, Sierra Leone is small, 7 million people, where like one state in Nigeria, or smaller than one state in Nigeria, or one chiefdom or district in India. So, and this is the thing about scale, right? So one can say, of course, we'll roll out something in one state in Nigeria. That's a pilot. But for me, the way I think about Sierra Leone as a pilot, you national scale is a pilot scale for many of these solutions, particularly when most of the people are not connected, and particularly when we're talking about data points that are not in the billions. We're talking about data points in the hundreds of thousands, at best millions, which, if we're talking about AI, that's nothing, right? That's very small. If you really want to build, if we're talking about deep learning, then we need to be able to get more real-time data, and a lot more. So we can't do deep learning and have these AI solutions in small pilots because we won't have enough data inputs. And my approach in our partnership and with this is, if we're doing work in Sierra Leone, we have to do it at national scale, because that's what's going to inform the data work anyway. But secondly, it also gives us a national perspective on these technology solutions. And that's the problem with AI, is that you build and test in a small scale space, and then unless you're building you have some kind of reinforcement learning or transfer learning algorithms, then what you tested and what you're going to roll out is not guaranteed to work. And we've seen this fail multiple times. And even if we're going to do reinforcement learning work, then we should still do it at scale, because again, even in Sierra Leone, there's so much difference between the different regions. And I think that's the challenge, by the way, with AI at national level. And as we do this, is it's difficult to not pilot, right? You have to do a pilot, but the pilot is not going to be enough to allow you to scale, because of the way the pilots are done, and because of how small, and what the different entry what the different challenges and constraints are. So for me, really, it's that we should do it, and we should do it at scale, and that's it. All of the things we'll learn, but we wouldn't really learn what we want to learn. And we can do things at scale, but while addressing privacy. It's not either or. We can keep privacy. We can make sure that people's data are not violated. We can make sure that there's security. We can make sure that third parties are not coming to take advantage of the information, and those, we can do all of those things at scale. And that would be my approach.
Thank you. I think that's an incredibly important point that you just brought up as well about privacy and personal data security. Have you seen any issues with that in all of the rolling out that you've done of data collection and using other deep tech innovations, both for education as well as COVID-19? I think we've seen issues with that in certain countries around the personal data and protections. Have any of those kind of cropped up in Sierra Leone, whether it's from individuals themselves, companies, governments, and how is that dealt with?
Not really. I think internally we try to solve for that. We try to make sure, and with contracts or engagements that we have, we put clauses in there that protects the citizen and that protects the national data. We're not blinded by the opportunities and the tech and the algorithms, right? It's still at the heart of this is people, the citizens still who are primary. Government has to work for the citizens. We're only trying to improve government service delivery, and part of that is protecting the citizen and being there for the citizen.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's so important to really think through all of that before rolling something out, because it seems to have some bright potential, or it's needed urgently. We definitely need to keep all of that in mind, and also speak with the users as we're developing all of it, which I know that you've been doing a lot of. One last question on deep tech, and then I'm going to turn over to some audience questions. So as we know, there are a lot of barriers to entry in deep tech. In particular, it definitely requires significant capital investment. And sometimes when it comes to new technologies, the return on investment or eventual commercialization can require several years, or be highly uncertain. But of course, they have the transformative potential there, and tend to sometimes attract investment from government or other patient investors, but can be a little bit more difficult with some of the other more obvious investors. Is this something that you've seen in Sierra Leone, and have you seen the government just kind of push forward even in times of uncertainty, when they're looking at new technologies and kind of seeing what the payoff is going to be? And do you think that that's the best way forward, or do you think that there's a better way to get more private sector and other types of investments?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we've been lucky in Sierra Leone in a way that costs. Well, we have to innovate around and be clever about not having highly expensive solutions. And in fact, it is because there are all these expensive solutions that companies have, and we don't have the millions of dollars to pay for them. Then we have to build, and we have to build locally. We have to build from the grass up. So it is in a way that the lack of resources to account for these major things is a driver to us being creative and innovative. I think when government needs to solve problems, we have found the resources, and we do have a close relationship with Ministry of Finance. We have a close relationship with the National Revenue Authority, and these are entities who are willing and are excited to work with us to develop solutions. I think money is definitely a problem, and I don't think we're going to And where we need high infrastructure, we take the loans, right? So we're trying to do metro ring fiber networks in the major cities and actually have fiber. The one thing that I was talking to my friend who's the CEO of one of the telcos, and we were saying these communities are going to go from 0G to 4G, right? There are many communities that don't have signal now, and that's the good part. Somebody was asking about Africa and driving innovation in general, and I think that's what the opportunities are. It's that in many African countries and in countries like Sierra Leone, we will go from 0G to 4G, and all new sites that these telcos put will be 4G enabled. And that means where there were no sites before. And what does it mean when somebody had zero connectivity to now be able to have data and send video messages and use apps, right? That's an investment. That's an investment that the telco people have to do because of the innovation that's ongoing, and we as a government have to facilitate that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's something that we're exploring, right? As we move forward and kind of taking the lead from others that are moving forward and taking some of those risks as well. So we've received a lot of great questions from the audience. I'm not surprised to see that a lot of the questions are personal ones for you, to find out a little bit more kind of about your journey and about your thinking. So a couple of the questions for you to answer is, what motivated you to return to Sierra Leone and take on the big task as the Chief Innovation Officer? The audience member commented that it's so great to see talented people such as yourself making real change happen. And then a follow-on question from another participant is to find out, what are the challenges that you face as the country's first Chief Innovation Officer? So over to you.
I mean, I think there are many challenges, but for me, I'm enjoying myself. I am doing something that I would ordinarily want to be doing. It's not a sacrifice. It's not, I'm doing what I want to do. And it's the opportunity to be home, the opportunity to work with other young people, the opportunity to work with people who are transforming the country. There's nothing better than that. Like I said, I've been on the road the last week in the northern region and gone to 5 districts and engaging people in places where there are no roads, where adult literacy is, I don't know, 10%. And there's nothing more fulfilling than doing that. And I think it's that we each, and I'm lucky to have the support and the team that facilitates that joy, right? It's difficult. There are many times when things don't work or when it's frustrating. And we did reschedule this session. And the first time I was in a place where connectivity wasn't guaranteed, but it ended up that I'm still again in outer Freetown and better connectivity. And, it's that there is, there are challenges, but that's why we're here. That's why we are committed to solving them.
Awesome. I hope that that's inspiring for some of the people that are tuning in right now as well. And we're obviously very, very happy that you're where you are now and that we're partnering with you. Another one of the audience participants wants to know, do you have a 5-year roadmap of what you'd like to achieve for Sierra Leone, or do you find kind of innovating as you go and figuring things out one step at a time is more effective with what you do?
We have a 10-year roadmap. The National Innovation and Digital Strategy is a 10-year document that we launched in November 2019. We also have the National Development Plan, which is a 5-year roadmap that drives what we do. And within education, we did have a 2-year education sector plan, which we're extending, and then we'll have a 5-year plan. So we do have long-term activities, vision, and we still have year-on-year, month-on-month set of activities. And some of those happen through relationships and networks, and I see that there are many people who are on this call who are edtech companies, and my team is on the call, Michaela and PJ, and they can respond and engage, and I see they've been doing that as well. We're very open and eager to collaborate, and we have the technical capacity to embrace and to understand, and this fits within our strategy that we have within the SDI or MBSSE, and that's core. It's that we don't do things ad hoc, but we're agile and flexible enough that we will sit with partners and understand what their interests are, private sector, public sector, PP, whatever it is, and see how that lines up with what we are doing. So for me, it's a question of I am lucky. I'm not talking about all of the governments, but my team is, like I said, young, crazy, agile, flexible. We're doing everything there, and we can.
Thanks, David. You know, maybe being young and crazy is a special ingredient that's needed everywhere. I know that's definitely, you know, an element that we try to look at a lot with the UN as well, of, you know, how do we kind of stick with our strategic plans where we have everything really kind of well planned out, but how do we, you know, also have some agility and flexibility within that. So definitely something that we can learn from you. Another audience question, we have time for just a couple more of them. Before joining the government, you were with IBM. Do you find the private sector less agile and less conducive to identify and drive? Oh, sorry, do you find the public sector less agile and less conducive to identify and drive innovations compared with the private sector?
You know, it's kind of ironic because actually, when you're in private sector, like IBM, not everybody, but I definitely had to work with government partners, right? And often government partners were the bottleneck. And so you're there and you're being innovative, but you have to roll out stuff with government. And if government is slow, then you can't really do anything. And so now I have had that opportunity to see how and engage with private sector, from private sector. I knew what the bottlenecks were that I hated from private sector when engaging with government. And now from within government, we try to not be that, right? So the SDI is not that. We are objective, including with our other partners, is we can never be a bottleneck. And I think my team tries to meet that as much as possible. And often the irony is that the bottleneck is usually the private sector companies at this point when working with my team and with my, so my team is a startup within government, and we run like a startup. I'm sure they will want us to have not a startup, not the culture, but, you know, startup struggle and all of that, and with resourcing. And I think they will want there to be a little bit more solid ground, and we will get there. But I think the culture they embrace. And so I don't find that we're very agile. We're texting, we're playful, we're playing, we're having fun, we're building, we're running at speed that I don't think I could have run even in a private sector organization.
Well, that's super to hear, and hopefully something that you can continue to keep as your team grows, right? And also maybe that you can help inject a bit into the larger government system as well. So the last question that we have from the audience is to get a sense from you of what you think the future of education will look like.
I think that it will be very much data driven. It will be directed to skills development. And one of the things we're doing is we have a new framework. We have these, what we call 5 C's: creativity, computational thinking, comprehension, civics, critical thinking. These are important. It's not just about literacy and numeracy. We have to be able to apply them. It will be hybrid. It will be student-centered, learner-centered, play-based, skills focused, and I think that's what matters really. And it's where we use data, not just for the individual, but for the school and the system to inform and drive policy decisions. So more evidence-based policies, more for the different contexts and different locations.
And do you think taking that approach of using data to inform and drive policy decisions is something that can be applied everywhere? Do you think it's unique to the situation that you have in Sierra Leone and potentially other countries, or do you see that as something that can be utilized everywhere?
It can be applied everywhere. I mean, it should be applied. I think we often, it's seen like when decisions that leaders make aren't abstract. These are decisions that are for the people, and it should be informed by data from the people. And I think that's critical, and that's essential for having effective policies that affect people's lives.
Definitely, and I think that can be applied much further beyond just the education sector, right? Well, thank you so much, David. I recognize that we're almost out of time here, so I'm going to hand it over to our colleague Jody from SGInnovate.
So thank you, Janine, and thank you everyone for joining us for our session today. On behalf of SGInnovate, I'd like to thank Janine for the amazing moderation for our discussion together with Dr. David. And we'd also like to thank our event partner, the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development, for making today's event possible. For attendees, please keep a lookout for our post-event EDM, which will include an event recording of today's session and post it on our YouTube page. Please also feel free to write to us at events@SGInnovate if you have any question. We hope that you'll continue to give the support for our events, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, David, and all of your team who's online right now. And thank you, Tuan, of course.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to collaborating further.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening or morning, wherever you're tuning in from.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.